are back with week 3 of the podcast. I'm still feeling a little bit under the weather, but I'm bouncing back, so I guess it's cold season a little bit. But yeah, so we're in week 3 of our series on the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And this week, John, you were preaching about the idea of Sabbath and what does it look like to Sabbath, specifically looking at Jesus' lifestyle and how his lifestyle gives us principles that we can carry into this idea of Sabbath that we can then practice in our own lives. And so to go ahead and just jump in, question number 1 that we wanted to discuss was, are you drawn to the idea of Sabbath or do you push back from it, and why?
I think ladies should go first.
There you go.
I would not say I am drawn to the idea of Sabbath. It feels impractical. Yes, we follow in the lifestyle of Jesus, but Jesus was a single guy with no children. And so sometimes, specifically in this practice, it can feel hard to figure out how that translates when you're working or you have young children, or you're working and you have young children, you have a house to take care of. This one feels hard to translate into my life.
So you're saying that it was easier for Jesus because he didn't have kids. So you're saying that raising kids makes it hard to have Sabbath.
They don't really like when you stop doing things. I mean, it's a little challenging to be like, we're going to Sabbath today. I'm not going to feed you. It doesn't really work.
So that presents challenges.
So it's possible. It's not a one-to-one, I feel like, comparison of how Jesus did it versus how I will do it. So it's just one that's harder for me to make it feel practical. So I think I push against it for that reason.
Just say, Gabe, I'm going to leave you.
I'll be back. I'm going to take a nap so I can Sabbath.
On the other side here, right?
Yes,
right.
I'll be back in an hour.
Yeah. He'll be fine.
Yeah.
He's self-sufficient.
That makes sense. I think that's a good perspective because I don't often see the mom perspective. I can forget how busy moms are at home with kids. And I remember when I would come home and I would be like, Amy, hey, let's just take some time. And like when our kids were little and she just couldn't stop because they just don't stop. So that presents a good challenge. For me, the idea of Sabbath, I think I like the idea of Sabbath until I consider what it means to Sabbath. I have a hard time, and if Amy were to watch this, but she won't, so I have a hard time stopping. Amy might disagree with that, but I do. I just can't settle myself to the point of just relaxing, if that's what it is, or stopping. I've always got to be doing. So I think in theory I like the idea a lot.
So I experienced that with you a few years ago when we went on a retreat, and we were in the middle of nowhere, and we had to keep the fire going every 20 minutes. Roddy's up stoking the fire every 20 minutes, and then he's like, okay, I got to go outside for a walk. So then we go outside for a walk, then we come inside, then he stoked the fire again. And so it was just this non-stop, every 20 minutes, he's got to be moving and doing something. So I experienced exactly what you're describing. You like being there, but you couldn't, you couldn't stop. So I experienced that with you. That's funny.
It's just foreign.
I would say for me, it has an incredibly inviting feel. Because I like to slow down, I like to be reflective, I like to enjoy those things in life. I would say where the rub is for me is, even though we don't have young kids at home, is just my wife and I getting on the same page on what this would look like. Because currently in her current role, she works in our home all week long, so she's in our home by herself. So when we have some time, guess what? She doesn't want to relax at home. She wants to go and wants to do something and wants to be somewhere. So for us, while it's something I'm drawn to, it has been a huge challenge for us to figure out how to do this together. That's my challenge.
Yeah, lifestyle clearly plays a lot into this, in your home dynamic, what that looks like, and then how you do it.
So let me ask you this question, Matt. So when you're pre-marriage, did you Sabbath better than you do post-marriage?
Honestly, I think I did.
Yeah, I think so too.
But hey, to Alicia's point, I was like Jesus. I was a single guy and I had kids. So
Matt said he was like Jesus.
Yeah,
wow. All right.
I think we should stop now.
Wow, I just elevated myself to a position that I shouldn't have. But yes, to Alicia's point though, I was in that same boat, and so yeah, it just I could do my own thing. I was just talking to a friend of mine this past week, and I said, yeah, like when you're single, it's like I wasn't like selfish in the sense of like, oh, I'm gonna do what I want because it's all about me. It was just more of like I didn't have anybody else to consider, so I could do what I wanted. So if I wanted to Sabbath for a whole day, I didn't have to ask anybody else if that was okay. I could just do it. And so yeah, it's definitely an adjustment of learning now how to Sabbath with somebody else in my home, doing that together. So yeah. So what's one practical way that you practice one of the 4 that John talked about in the sermon today? And that would be stop, rest, delight, or contemplate when it comes to Sabbath.
So I'll jump in first on the rest. Always take a nap. I love naps. Always take a nap. Alicia would validate that growing up in my house. Always make sure I take a nap. So that's a top priority for me on the rest piece. Don't get it during the week. Get it on that day. So.
You got this one answer?
I have some thoughts. there have been seasons of my life that I've been better at this. My current season is not one of them, but I've been trying to think about ways I can build this in. So I don't know exactly which category it would fall into, but so Fridays are my day off, but I'm also home alone with Gabe, so I can't stop everything. But I try to you should do this all the time, but more so on Sabbath, I try to prioritize him. So if he brings me a book, even if I'm in the middle of something, I stop and I sit down and I'll read the book with him. If I'm sitting on the floor folding laundry and he comes over and wants to sit in my lap, I'll stop and I'll just hold him. So a little bit of stopping, resting, delighting, prioritizing relationship. So that's just a little way that I often am in a hurry. I want to get as many things done. If I'm baking and he's awake, I will include him. This makes baking much more challenging and much messier and much more, everything. There's things everywhere. But he has a great time and he's connecting with me, and I feel like maybe that falls into that delight, getting lost in the moment, not feeling like my to-do list is most important, prioritizing the relationship. So even though I'm not stopping everything I'm doing, I am trying to prioritize relationships over my to-do list, specifically on that day.
That's good, Alicia.
Yeah, I think for me, it's an interesting one. I think the contemplative side of things, I know I am viewed very much as an extrovert, but I think I'm a closet introvert. So I really enjoy my time alone, and that's something that I've been gaining. Mark's almost out of the house, Maddie's not in the house, Amy works on Fridays, so it's usually just me, and I can find myself getting lost in my thoughts. And I really think what those thoughts are, as I sit and look at it, I have a lot of conversations with God. And I just sit there and listen and stay attuned to what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what God is saying. And that typically revolves around something, a passage that I'm reading or something. And that's been really meaningful to me. It's been just taking the time to do that. It's taken some time to get to the point that can happen. But it's been really encouraging to me.
Yeah, and I think, Roddy, that's going to connect with some of the other practices that we're going to talk about these next couple weeks. But you have to have time to do that. You can't be still with God in a hurry, on the move. So that's really good.
Yeah, I had someone ask me this morning when they're coming into church, and maybe you can speak into this, John. They said, what do I do? I hear what you guys are talking about. How do I make time? I can't make the time for this stuff.
Yeah.
I think sometimes there's this thought, well, you guys are pastors, you're on a church staff, and so you guys really don't live a normal life. It's like we work like 1 day a week, and
this is easy for you.
Yeah, right. This is easy for you to do.
Yeah.
So how do you answer that, John? How do we help people? Because like the 4-hour thing might be even deep for some people to jump in.
Well, I think part of it is explaining to people that for us, even when we work at a church, for us to follow the way of Jesus, I'll give you a good example in my life. The things that I'm teaching on Sunday are not things that I'm spending time reading as my own personal devotional time with Jesus during the week. I have to carve out something totally separate from my job, this time that I'm teaching or preparing. It's just Jesus and me, about God interacting with me, not to do with anybody's problems, anybody's situation, any message I'm preaching. So I think the biggest thing is that I would say to them, is you crawl before you walk, and you walk before you run.
Yeah.
So you have to carve out these little tiny spaces. And, like Alicia was saying, even, if you choose a certain time period, say, when I'm on the road, I'm not going to be in a hurry in this time period. I'm going to get in the longest line, and I'm just going to wait and be patient and not be rushed. So when I was encouraged to do that a few years ago, I just forced myself in these little windows. Okay, I'm going to do this for an afternoon. Even though I'm not taking a break from everything, which I'm encouraging everybody to do, I think even, with our phones, whether we put them on grayscale or we put them in a box, I think we've got to shut that stuff down. And we've got to, because I talked about it, this morning. I said, the Jewish people, they were slaves in Egypt, and it's like we went back to Egypt. We're slaves to our technology. And so we've got to shut that down. So I think, and you've got to take little steps. So that's what I would encourage, Roddy. I would say to someone, just take a little step. Pick one thing and do it consistently over a period of time. And you will experience God in the consistency of following Jesus. Not always in the moment, but in the consistency. And that's, I think, what you're describing in your own personal time with God. You're doing this more and more consistently, and you're becoming more settled, and now it's inviting to you.
Right. When you talked about it like exercise today, that made sense to me, because there was a point in my life where if you just said exercise, it'd have been like, oh, that's a terrible idea. And now I think about it like I look forward to that. It's something that and it took time, and it took sacrifice, and it took commitment, and it was miserable for a while. But now it's something that I enjoy doing.
Yeah. Hey Matt, before we jump into the next question, can I identify a couple of resources?
Yep.
So, I mentioned on the handout just some passages of scripture for everybody to read through this week that really talk about the life of Jesus in this. But two other resources that I use as a reference point. One is, it's called the Sabbath Practice. You can download this off the internet, which is what I did. Oops, upside down there. And it's just about the Sabbath practice. It talks about, they use a little bit different language than we have here, but same idea. And what it does is, in each one of these stop, rest, delight, and contemplate, it gives you a very long list. Like, there's a list of things that you can do. So if you're looking for some ideas, this is a great resource with ideas of some ways to just give it a try, to explore time with Jesus. So this is at practicingtheway.com.
And that's John Mark Comer. He does that as well, who wrote the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
So you can go there, you can download this and just print it out. Great tool. Another thing that I would recommend is a book on Sabbath by Dan Allender, and it's called The Ancient Practices Series. And it's just a book that talks a little bit and gives you some ideas. And again, like I was saying to Roddy, just pick one and try it. And do it for a few weeks. See how it goes. But those might be some resources that can help you as you're navigating this. So.
Yeah, for sure. John, you mentioned that whole idea of what you preach isn't what you're doing for your devos and like your personal time with the Lord. And I remember a professor at Liberty saying, hey, like, you can't make your time with God doing your like Bible readings that you have to do for class. He was like, you're required to do that stuff, you've got to do that. He was like, but the fact is, he's like, you're just making God share with something else. And he's like, he shouldn't be sharing anything. He should have his own time. So sit there, carve out your own time to do your devos and spend time with the Lord. He's deserving of that. Don't make him share what you're just doing for your homework so that you can finish your degree. And so I think it just speaks to anything that we talk about here is you've got to set separate time aside for it so that God's not competing with other things that you're having to do. He gets his time with you so that you can really build that relationship. So for us, which of the three things that John mentioned at the end of the sermon, as far as practicing the Sabbath, which one are you guys going to do? There was the shallow end, the slow immersion, or the shallow end was the 4 hours, the slow immersion was 8 to 10, or the dive straight into the deep end, cannonball, jackknife, whatever you want to do for 24 hours.
So Roddy gets to start with this one because I saw him and Amy sitting on the up in the service together. I don't know if Alicia's husband Mark was there, and I couldn't get my wife to come on the stage and talk about it with me when I asked everybody to do it. So Roddy, you get to start off on this one.
Yeah. So it was interesting. Our conversation really revolved around the fact that the day that works for Amy is not the day that works for me.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
Amy's like, Roddy, I'm going to do it on Friday, and she's like, I work Friday. I'm sorry. so she's like, I'm gonna do it Saturday, and I'm like, well, I guess I could do Saturday. But so we're gonna slowly immerse. I think we've got to start small. I have not been well disciplined with my Sabbath, and I find myself I work a whole lot more than I probably think I do. But even just getting my mind to shut off about what's happening it's hard. So that's where we're gonna start.
Okay.
We have not had a chance to talk about it, but we have the same problem. My days off are Friday, Saturday. His are Saturday, Sunday. Mm-hmm. And so we have one day in the middle, and it feels hard to Sabbath because it's also our only day to get things done together. Mm-hmm. So we haven't figured out how to do it together. So I would say I take chunks of time. So I would say like there's a chunk of time I take on Friday, and maybe a chunk of time I take on Saturday. And it's not, and I think there's value in it being consecutive because I think you kind of sink into the idea of Sabbath a little bit deeper at the time. But at the moment, I would say it's more chunks of time. And there's a concept, I think he talks about it in the book. He calls it pleasure stacking. And he talks about, because I wouldn't say I look forward to the idea of Sabbath, but he talks about this idea of building in all these things that you look forward to. Our small group just did this study, and that was an idea some of them we've kind of latched onto, this idea of like, then you look forward to it. Like, I'm going to do all these fun things. And there are still things that have to be done in the midst of it because all of us in our group are in the season of having young kids. Yeah. But we build things into that day that are fun, that we look forward to, that are exciting, as a way to look forward to Sabbath rather than, it's a day I have to stop doing things and they're all waiting for me when I come back. So that's been an interesting twist for me to think about it differently. But I would say I have like a 4-hour chunk here and a 4-hour chunk there.
And you can pleasure stack in that time.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good illustration. Thanks for sharing that. I would say I'm in the same boat. Like I said, I tried to get Christine to come up on stage and discuss this with me when everybody else was, but she was not having any of that. So it's a conversation still to be had. Yeah. We do try to carve out time regularly, but the problem is what ends up happening is we put other things into that time. So we put running errands into that time or doing a project into that time, which is not restful for me. And so I think we have to figure out what's the time that we're going to do the pleasure stacking or things like that, because she has a little bit more flexibility in her job, so we have the ability to align those things. But I think for us, it's not aligning them, but it's figuring out what's going to take place in them that will allow us both to experience a sense of rest. So we have some work to do on this. So I would say stay tuned on how this goes for us.
Yeah. I will chime in. I was able to talk with Rachel because she was sitting right next to me. Okay. And she looks at me and she goes, we're 24-hour in this thing. I was like, okay, so when are we doing that? And she was like, well, I don't work Friday and you don't work Friday. Okay. So the perks of her being a nurse is she does have some days off.
She does get them.
And frequently, like, Fridays just end up lining up. And so we both have Friday completely off. Okay. So she was like, all right, we're gonna bake. I think she's meeting up with Vanessa at some point to have coffee, and they're doing a little Bible study, the two of them, and so we'll get to sleep in, or I will try and encourage us to sleep in. She does not like to sleep in, but we'll do our devos together and just do some different things. So I think we're looking forward to it. But the idea of like a whole day, because we've got a busy couple weeks coming up, so to be able to. I feel fortunate in the sense to be able to say, hey, we do both have a full day to where we're off and we can just kind of do we can pleasure stack in what we want to do for
It's
it.
a lot
and
of
all
pleasure
that.
stacking in 24 hours.
I know, yeah, there is. So we'll see how it goes. But that's Rach. She's a take the bull by the horns. So let's just do this thing and
Cool.
go 24
Great
hours. So.
illustration of that, so.
But awesome. Well, thanks guys for chiming in on this topic. But again, like we're not experts on this. This is something that we're all learning. We are practicing this alongside of all of you guys, and so it's fun to be able to learn to do this together and say, hey, we're all growing in our walk with Jesus as we try to stay in rhythm with Jesus, and that becomes a lifestyle. And so we're excited for what's to come. What's the practice next week?
So next week, Jeremy is up, and he's going to be diving into silence and solitude. So
All right.
the loudest guy on our staff gets to talk about how to be quiet. So
Yep.
that should be great. Looking forward to that with Jeremy next week.
Awesome. Well, yeah, so we will be back next week, and Jeremy will be in here, and we'll be discussing silence and solitude as we continue in our series on the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you next week.